Welcome to another conversation where we'll be talking with Virginie Coulloudon, and we're going to be exploring her company, Your Public Value. It's an NGO that she has set up to explore how organizations work with their environment, their society, and their teams in order to create change. And also to manage and support that change creation. So, Virginie, it'd be great if you could just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Thank you, Robert. It's a pleasure to be back and see you again. I'm a former Animus student. I came to better understand coaching and the personal link that one has, human to human, and understand that better. It was a great experience. And the NGO is actually something we wanted to create a couple of years ago. It's at baby stage, because we thought that any business, big, not big, actually, whether they understand it or not, they do create value. They have a role to play in society, and they play that role, again, as I say, whether it's understood or not understood. So public value is not a new concept. It was created 25 years ago at Harvard. And the way we interpret it, it's value created for all, meaning for all and each of us, but also for society and the environment. And you know very well that there's been quite a lot of discussions in the sustainability sector, and it can be very technical. And a lot of companies have embraced sustainability strategies. However, they don't all embrace public value. So we as citizens, as people, we are very often impacted positively, but also negatively by some companies and some corporations. And a lot of people increasingly want to have a role to play. And we are here to create dialogue between business, the big business, and society. That's in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. So it sounds like the part of what you're doing is creating that conversation between business and society, so they can kind of look at what are the needs of society and how business can sort of impact that.
Right, but before we get to dialogue, we need to have business people understand who constitutes their ecosystem. They function in terms very often with silos, with categories. So you would have the suppliers, the clients, the shareholders, the donors, the media. But what about you and me? Where do we fit in any company's ecosystem? Are we important, not important? Most of the time we are, because we are actually the ones that keep the level of reputation. So it's very important for any company. And we work on values. We work with them on understanding their own values and really making sure that their values are aligned internally and externally. What I mean is that everyone, if you ask everyone, you know that better than I do, everyone would share the value of honesty, courage, transparency, and fairness. But what do people really understand by fairness, transparency, and honesty? Where do the boundaries, how do they set these boundaries? Where do they stand? So that's the work, which a lot is about coaching, and it's a lot is about coaching individually, group coaching, and team coaching, which is slightly different.
So before we sort of look at how you do this work, I'm really interested to explore how you went about creating the company. So if somebody was to follow in your footsteps, sort of what's the journey that you've gone on to create the organization?
It was a very difficult learning curve because we're based in Germany and I don't speak German. So it was not the easiest way, but Germany has all the fiscal code and legislation translated into English available online. So that's a good point for the country, to be honest. It's not a company, it's an NGO, an association, an organization, not a company. We don't do business, we don't do consulting. What we do is advocacy, and we really care about making sure that people understand and change their behavior one way or another. So we started, I say we, because an organization is collective. And the collective value is very high in my mind. So we were 20 at the beginning, and we started with, you know, a vision, a mission statement, and a registration. So a lot of bureaucracy in my case.
So that's really interesting here that it was, we talk about it not being a company and it being about advocacy. I think a lot of people, when they think about doing some sort of social impact work, they think about creating a company or a business that does that. And I'm just curious as to why you took the choice to create it as an NGO as opposed to a company.
First of all, you can create a company and have social impact and make money. That's absolutely fair, fine, etc. In our case, public value, as I said, is a concept that already existed. And guess what? If we wanted to be a consulting firm, we would have had a huge obstacle because, you know, there are huge auditing firms like the Big Fours, and EY, formerly Ernst & Young, do use public value as one of their tools. So it became obvious that it was not the easiest competitor. And also because we thought that there is quite a lot to do to advocate and explain why this is important. Whatever the figures you take and the research you take, all the big KPMG or the UN, they all have their own numbers of the companies that behave properly with regard to the sustainable development goals or with regard to society and the environment, but they are always under the 10% threshold. So if it is 10% of individuals who think collectively for the good of the planet, then it's 90% who do not, right? I mean, I'm not good in math, but this one I got. So, so 90% who actually need to understand and to whom we need to advocate. So that was the main reason why we decided to create an NGO.
And in that, the creation of that NGO in order to do this work, and we'll talk about, you know, what the work is in detail in a moment, you know, were there any other challenges apart from not being able to speak German and setting it up in Germany? What were the other sort of issues that you came across?
We actually advocate for a multi-stakeholder approach. We're about dialogue. So we decided to have ourselves a multi-stakeholder approach. And I usually say that means a lot of coffee breaks. Really, you really need to speak to people who think differently. So we are approximately 35%, 40%, it's only 20, but you know, a big bunch come from the corporate sector. Another group comes from a non-profit sector or international organizations, that's my case. And then you have a bit of multilateral and politics. And we function very differently. Even if we have a similar vision, a similar goal, the way we would like to operate is very different. And I think it's good to apply to us what we tell people to do. It's a good rule generally, but it's not an obstacle. It's just, it is not that easy. And we understand the difficulty to get to genuine dialogue, to go to the bottom of anything you want to do, because we ourselves drink a lot of coffee together to discuss that.
So there's the sort of the coming together of different people and having conversations about what it is you want to do. Creating your values, your mission statement that kind of allow you to coalesce around the idea of the change that you want to make and the kind of advocacy that you want to call for within organizations. And so having come together and sort of created that group, How do you then get into the organizations to begin that work? So I know a lot of people, when they're thinking about working, especially sort of organizationally, part of the challenge is, well, how do we actually get the organizations to listen, to have that conversation, to join with us? So how did you go about that bit?
Well, we started like that. So in a way, you can say it's a organizational culture. That's how we function. Every General Assembly is extremely intense, a lot of conversation, everything is out there. And we all agree to function with only one really rule, which is co-creation. So we started so it took us a year and a half to get together, to have all our documents internally and a bit of funding. I have to say that's an important nerve lever. And starting in January, we had a number of, you can say, workshops. We call them public value labs. And with these public value labs, one in London, one in Zurich, one in Berlin, and then disruption and COVID, we did it just like Animus does. We did it online, but only with co-creation, making sure that you would have people from different fields and different approaches together. And you can decide it's a style, but it is a style. At the same time, it's really how we function to get to any objective we have. And in 5 months, we had 124 experts in sustainability from all kinds of fields and countries, but from Europe, who co-created 9 public value principles. And now we have these principles, and now we can actually speak on behalf of these 124 experts and say, this is how we think you should implement, any vision you would have in support of society, the environment, and your own purpose, your own corporate objectives.
And how did you get people joining those co-creation labs? Because it's a great idea to go, right, let's have a lab and let's invite people to where we can have this co-creation to create these principles. But how did you go about actually getting people to show up to that?
And they all, those who confirmed all showed up. We had a very high level of answers. We were very grateful to them. I think the reason is that people are interested. This is not just, oh, I had an idea. I think we're addressing a need as citizens. We want business to act differently. We want business to stop the harm made to the environment, stop the harm made to some communities along the supply chains. We just want things to change as people and experts and business. And therefore, yes, they came on in their personal capacity, but we had people coming from the biggest companies. We were hosted by Vattenfall, which is a big energy group in Berlin. They come from the north, but still. Multiplex is a big international construction company in London. EY Switzerland, because they were interested in where we could push the debate further. Then we did it online. But still, I think people were really, really involved, engaged. We had a lot of intense conversations. And you need to be able to facilitate giving enough time to each representative. So you would come representing your field, and you would be the only one. It was not about competitiveness. You had to speak on behalf of your field. So your public sector, your private sector, your civil society sector, gender, environment, society, etc. And then you speak on behalf of who you represent anonymously.
I think there's something really key here around this idea of people showed up in their personal capacity, but representing their field. And you were able to touch on the need that they observed, or the value that was important to them, which allowed them to come and be part of that, which then allowed it to grow into the size that it grew. And I think when people are thinking about creating their own projects and programs, it's really important. If you want organizations to be involved, you don't just speak to that organizational need, but speak to the needs of the individuals within that organization in order to pull them into the space.
Exactly. It's very personal and very human. This human link has to be refreshed in a way.
And you spoke there as well about getting funding. And how did you go about getting funding? Because I know a lot of these sort of programs, one of the challenges is, how do we get funding? How do we, how a lot of people do them as volunteer programs, but some of them also manage to get, government or funding or sponsorship. How did you go about that?
Well, this one is a real headache, Robert, and I'm not different from others. We are volunteers. And I'm volunteer, but it's a volunteering work that takes over 100% of my time. So I wish I could push the time boundaries here. It's a personal choice. It's a headache. We got funding, very interestingly, from China. China and the UK are the two countries that understand best public value, interestingly enough. China, you may consider that it's because they are far ahead in destroying their own environment. And they are now thinking a lot. There is a business school based in Cardiff that actually uses public value and teaches public value, and a lot of their students are Chinese. So I think there is a lot of thinking there, but as I said, across the planet, it's 10%. So 10% of Chinese is a lot of people, but it's 10%. We really need to push the boundaries here. So of course, we do like everybody else. We apply to institutional donors and we knock at various doors and we have programs and we answer calls for proposals, etc. But that one is a headache.
Yeah. I'm aware that when running these sorts of programs, that getting the funding is a job in of itself, as well as yes, running the program.
Yes.
And as you talk about this and saying you're a volunteer, but it takes up 100% of your time, I know that people listening will be sort of asking themselves that question. Well, I want
how does she live?
But how do I sustain myself in all of this?
Yeah, no. I wouldn't say you all have to follow my path, because financially that's not the right one. But in terms of impact, I think I'm happy. I can see how it works. I'm doing coaching so I'm not 100%, let's say. I'm doing coaching in addition, and I try to do team coaching in addition, so I can survive. But absolutely, it's a lot less finances than I used to have when I was a high-level professional in global companies or things like that. I think at one point you are confronted with your own choices and path, and it's up to you. So coaching is important, and public value is important to coaching as well. So they are actually helping each other.
And I just want to kind of take a step back. You've spoken a lot about public value, and people listening will be sort of going, but so what is that, and how does that work?
So the definition I use, and the one we use at Your Public Value, is value created for all and each of us, for society and the environment. And that is something we address business with. So when we talk to big corporations, we say, okay, you somewhere have a corporate social responsibility program, but is it close enough to your strategy, to your core values, to actually make you a company that creates public value, that is worth creating public value? Or is it only a cherry on the cake? Are we talking about greenwashing, or are we talking about something real? And of course, I don't say that, I'm not rude. I try to not be rude, but to make it simple, it's about being sure that any corporation really creates value for all but for you and me, Robert, as well as for society and the environment.
So that's sort of the individual, the group, and the environment are very much part of the exploration with the organizations around what are you doing and how are you impacting these spaces, and how can we work together to create a positive impact within these spaces.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can't have public value if the personal values of all your employees are not aligned. If you never went to understanding what fairness meant to everyone, you know. So there is a work to be done on values, personal values of everyone, and then the team values, and then the corporate values, and the ecosystem.
Yeah, because that the ecosystem that kind of sits around all of this and sort of holds this together and connects everybody, all of those parts also need to be addressed within the organizations, I imagine.
Yes, absolutely. And most of the time, just the state of the environment is forgotten. I think we can easily refer to the example of Volkswagen. They just simply forgot about the environment when they did the special diesel, motor, or there are a lot of examples like that. We're not here to blame and shame. We're just here to help also the companies. So stand is really a positive one. Okay, you need to really pivot your strategy to make it happen. And we know that it is difficult. And the biggest you are in terms of corporation, the most difficult it is.
So we've spoken about how you get into organizations via having these these meetings where individuals show up but represent industry, and then you have conversations with them that allows you then to approach the larger organizations. And then when you sort of meet with an organization and they say, okay, we're going to work with you, what does that work look like?
We co-create. So we don't do consulting, as I explained, but because there's a lot of work to do on the ecosystem. So what we do, take a sector, whatever you want. We were in the automobile sector. We work, well, I prefer someone I'm actually working on. So the health sector. So we invite people who would represent the health sector from all perspectives. So you would have the pharma companies, hospitals, clinics, the territorial systems, depending on which country you are functioning, people like you and me, the patients, but also people representing the environment, pollution, and also NGOs trying to do something different in that sector. And they all speak together, and they all actually co-create ways or implementation approaches. How can they work better together? It's important for the pharmaceutical companies because they care about patients, of course. It's their main clients, yeah. But in a way, they need people to be ill to have success. So there is a conflict of interest that is inherent in just being a pharmaceutical company. And we know of NGOs that actually are working quite a lot on prevention, and the public sector works a lot on prevention. So how can they actually function together and create new objectives so that we have a better outcome? So that's our role as an NGO. There would be a lot of things to do as coaches or as consultants, but that's what we do as NGOs.
So this really sounds like you're creating a space for the discussion to be had and facilitating that discussion so people can share those conflicts and explore how might one resolve that, or just become aware of that conflict in itself.
This is very close to coaching. It's about space, healthy dialogue and space, non-judgmental, where people can feel comfortable sharing their thoughts or their willingness to change and their difficulties. So it's important to understand where the obstacles lie and what are the levers to actually get someone. So yes, it's about dialogue. Dialogue takes a lot of energy, actually. And the outcome is either awareness or, in best cases, partnerships, yes, that come together.
Okay, so there's kind of, when you go into these, you're sort of going, right, so how can we create awareness within these organizations? And a better outcome is, how can we create a partnership so together they can join and create some kind of change or effect in the kind of the environment or in society?
Well, how you create awareness is putting people together with different perspectives. It's enlarging the lenses, offering new lenses, enlarging the perspectives, and making sure that they have enough space to reflect. So it's a full day. Online, it's not a full day like you have today, but it's 3 hours where people can stay focused. And they have enough space to express themselves because it is anonymous. So they know who they are, they can exchange on LinkedIn or something else, but it is anonymous for the sake of the group. And they bring it back to their own ecosystem, and they become, in a way, ambassadors. So some like it, some do not like it, but that's how the awareness chain develops. The partnerships, then it either happens or it doesn't. It's not a job, but a lot is happening during coffee breaks. I love the coffee breaks.
I think coffee breaks are where a lot of really interesting things take place, and a lot of change actually happens and new ideas come from. Yeah. So you were saying there that they come together, but they come together into that space anonymously. Yeah. So how does that sort of work?
Meaning they're contacted personally.
Yeah. So if I show up to the space.
Yeah, you're invited.
So I'm invited.
You're invited. You can't show up like that. It's not public. You're invited because you represent a part of society that is important to this conversation, or a part of business, or part of the public sector. So you have a role to play. No one can come as an observer. And people who are shy, they're shy usually 20 minutes, and then they get it and they start, building. So you're invited anonymously, in the sense that when we report on the outcome, we won't say that Robert Stevenson from Animas participated and said that. So it's not only Chatham House, it's also the companies are not mentioned, because we are not here about competition. We don't want to push too hard. Most of the time, a good part of our participants are responsible investors. So you don't want, the companies to fight to be there and to get some investment.
That's really interesting. So they're themselves in the space, but the reporting anonymizes the conversations and the interaction, so that people can be really open and free in the communication that they have. And a bit before, you were talking about how you work with them as individuals and as teams and as groups. So can you give a little bit sense of how that work takes place?
Right, that in my coaching work, I always consider teams to be living bodies in a way. So when you do group coaching, a lot of the time you continue to do individual coaching, but in a different way, in a collective manner. Whereas a team coaching, you focus on the team as being an individual. So the team is comprised of several people, of course, but it's important to understand to what extent the individual values of these participants are aligned with the team values. Most of the time, the teams are not seen or understood as living bodies, but the team has values, the team has needs, and the teams have an ecosystem, a specific ecosystem within the company's ecosystem. And I think it's really, we work on the pain points of the team, we work on the needs, on their ecosystem, we do the opportunities, the threats, etc. But we also work internally in their own ecosystem and externally. And one of the main points we do both at Your Public Value and I do personally is to try to identify the invisible stakeholders. So what is an invisible stakeholder? Well, when you're French, you understand very, very fast. It's the yellow jacket. So that's a typical invisible stakeholder, for example. We had President Macron, president, try to do well, listen to all environmental experts and imposed a tax on carbon. And then those who actually were not necessarily in action or in a political party, but needed their car to go to work every day and didn't have enough money to add a tax to their daily expenses, they came out with a yellow jacket, as you may have seen, including last Saturday, and it cost enormous money to the state, to people, to society, to the environment, because of the anger that you can hear weekly. That's typical and invisible stakeholder. High influence, very low visibility. So who are your visible stakeholders as a company? Who is out there that you have never paid attention to, but could have a very high influence at a particular point? So we welcome that. And once these people are highlighted, then you think about their needs and how you as a company or a team, you can actually appreciate what they need and help them.
So this is really interesting. As I'm listening to this, it's sort of that all of these different ecosystems that exist, some that are visible, some that are invisible, trying to highlight them, to notice them, to pay attention to them, so they can all be part of that co-created conversation that looks at what's the change that we're going to create, or the awareness that we want to create, and the partnerships that we want to create. So there's lots of creation taking place, and also, you know, I really find that a fascinating thing around our invisible stakeholders, the invisible that are impacted upon, but we don't think about, and how do we bring them into the space? It sort of reminds me of sort of narrative coaching work, and where we talk about, you know, who are the members of this story or this dialogue that have been left out, and how can we bring them back into the story to explore, but also that idea of what's not being said, what's not being explored, and how do we bring that into the space? So that's a really interesting connection for me.
Yes, and also how can you work? It's a way to work on prevention, actually. If you include those who you are not used to, who are hidden or invisible to you, they are not invisible in general, but to you at a particular moment, you can use them as a positive level or leverage to actually create prevention. And most of the time, this is how it works. So they help you as well as you are able to help them.
And I guess that you know, part of bringing so many different people together helps you to identify, you know, who are the invisible, who have we forgotten, who else needs to be part of this conversation, as opposed to just bringing one sector of society into the space.
Of course, because you multiply the perspectives and the lenses, and through dialogue and discussion, a lot appear that you had not thought of beforehand. So it's a bit complex. It's difficult to sell to any company in a couple of sentences. You don't have a tagline easily, except for dialogue for all, but it actually does work. It does work. And I think people are really thirsty. They really need this exchange of experience and being able to bring something to the table or to the space and participate in co-creating a new world. So it's based on this positive approach that we create the way we function. Yes.
So as you think about having been delivering this work for a time now, are there any things that you sort of go, if I knew this now when I started, I would have done things differently?
All right, this one is not difficult to answer, but difficult to accept. I am still very proud that we created an NGO. I think advocacy is needed, but I have to confess this could have been a bit of an intellectual exercise. Yes, there are 90% of people unaware of that, so let's go and advocate. And I didn't think through in terms of being comfortable personally and financially, etc. So I don't regret, but it didn't make my life easier. Yeah, that's for sure. So I think we could share ideas, even being a business. That's what I was saying. You can have a business, have a very important social impact, have a very people-oriented approach, and make money. So yeah, this one is more difficult to accept and to understand.
And so do you have any plans to, because you talked about not being a consultancy, do you have any plans to create a consultancy arm to what you do, or is it very important for you just to stay focused on the advocacy of the work?
I think it's important, and if your energy go in so many ways, then you don't get anywhere. So it's very important. This is how we chose it. May not be the easiest way, as I said, but this is it. This is who we are. So we are already creating tools. We have a very nice board game and cards. And so when people think of ecosystems, they play with cards. It's relaxing, etc. This we will put on the website so it's available to all. And we will continue with new research tools and sharing at large. And we hope that, donors, institutional donors will be interested at one point. So yes, we continue with the NGO.
Yeah, so you're also sort of creating product at the same time and creating tools that people can use.
Yes, absolutely. It's important because if you agree with a certain vision and you don't know how to do it yourself, you don't want to wait for a consultant or two. There are tools that we will make very soon available through our website.
That's great, because I think that a lot of people listening will be going, how do I do that? How do I share this to somebody else? Because whilst over the time of our conversation, I'm beginning to wrap my head around how this works. It'll be, I imagine if I was listening to this, I'd be going, but how do I meet somebody and talk to them about this in order to create this, and knowing that there are tools on their way, I think going to be really useful, and people have lots of interest around that.
Yeah, being an NGO, we're also thinking of having an online training soon. So I think by early 2021. And so you would be able to basically go through a quick 1 week or 2 weeks presentation and then take it home and do it yourself. So we are actually working on expanding, this membership and the awareness raising. Absolutely, that's what we do now.
So there's some really interesting sort of next steps there for you. There's the training, there's the products, the games, the tools. Is there anything else that you're sort of going, this is in the pipeline that you can share with us?
We're about to finish a report on the 9 principles and the importance of co-creation. So this would be a small book for those who keep reading, less and less. And we actually would like to enlarge the membership so then we can hear about everyone, and we can continue to improve ourselves. So, it's a two-way thing, and we need to hear more from experts, non-experts, citizens, companies, so we can actually build this dialogue and grow. So that's coming, yes.
And the 9 principles, is that something that you can share with us now?
Yes, yes. It's going to be launched at the end. It's going to be launched at the end of September, so in a few days. But we have them, and how do you want them? I can send it to you. It can be attached to this video if this is interesting.
Yeah, so we'll share some of the information, but also how, if you let us know how people can connect with you as well, that would be great as well.
Yes, we have a LinkedIn group, and we are happy to invite and have a discussion. Our website is, in one word, yourpublicvalue.org. We are an NGO. Yourpublicvalue.org, and then the same on LinkedIn. And we actually try to talk and listen and engage in dialogue. You can see on this group quite a lot of these principles, and it's going to be launched by the end of September. Yeah.
So we look forward to receiving that launch of the 9 principles, and then we can share that out and allow others to connect with you and with the work that you're doing. And sort of before we end the conversation, I'd love to sort of hear what's something that you feel most sort of proud of or excited around for your achievements with this work.
I think it was the quality of dialogue and this collective intelligence that we saw during the 5 months from January to end of May this year, no matter any COVID threat, and people coming, asking to come back, very high quality, and building that space where people feel safe and can actually exchange. I was very happy. I learned a lot from them. I think one of my qualities or issues is that I am extremely curious. And this curiosity never stops. So that's what I love in coaching. That's what I absolutely enjoyed, listening to these 124 experts. And we would go by round and by round, using a bit the Delphi approach until the arguments are the ones that we keep. That was fascinating. So I continue to believe in collective intelligence. My values of collectivism are extremely high, and as well as my curiosity, I think we can always be amazed listening to people. So.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's been so fascinating listening to how, as an individual, being part of a collective and connecting with other collectives and ecosystems, the range of impact and the size of impact that you're able to create, and also to instigate. I feel that, that part of what your organization is doing is starting conversations that then continue, that create partnerships that then continue. And through that huge ripple effect that then kind of launches itself around the world. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your ideas, and the work that you're doing. It's been a real pleasure having this conversation with you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.